I'm extremely fortunate individual because I always seem to hit the nail on the head and get the right people on my show. People with experience, people whose information I can rely upon. And on that score, I have with me today Mr. Clem Bob, well known to all St. Lucians, who is chairman of the DCA, Development Control Authority. As a matter of fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Bob may have served at least 4 different terms of government as chairman of the DCA. And based on what is going on presently in respect to the National Trust and the government and Pigeon Island, I thought it fitting to go straight to the head of the fountain and to get some information. Mr. Bob, I have a couple of questions for you. I'll give you 3 questions together and you can deal with them at your own speed. The role of the DCA, you've been chairman for almost 20 years, and how does the DCA operate? I would like, because I'm quite certain that 99.99% of St. Lucians don't understand the work of the DCA. They hear the DCA and just hear what DCA means, Development Control Authority. And as we go along, I will ask a few more questions because I have been in development now for 50 years in St. Lucia. I know the DCA. I know the ins and outs of DCA. I know what can happen. I know the delays, all what has to be done before development is approved. Mr. Bob.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Thank you for inviting me to the show and giving me the opportunity to explain what the DCA does. And in fact, this is one of the opportunities I welcome most of all because we are able to inform people. That's one of the things, maybe the fault of the DCA for not being more forthcoming with information on itself and on programs like this. So I certainly thank you for that privilege. The Development Control Authority, as the name implies, is the authority that is responsible for granting permission or for looking at any projects, whatever it is, on the island. The Development Control Authority is, as you know, by statute, an act of Parliament. The first act of Parliament for the Development Control Authority was in 1971. The new act, which came in 2001 and came into effect 2005, still preserve the actual authority of the DCA, which is the Development Control Authority and its members, which is made up of members and technical staff. Now, I think I need to state clearly there is a distinction between the Development Control Authority and the Ministry of Physical Planning. The Ministry of Physical Planning, in fact, comes under the same minister as the Development Control Authority. But Ministry of Physical Planning deals with government business. They design government schools and they will help with government policies in terms of developing plans for lands and various uses and stuff like that. But the Development Control Authority deals with the actual projects and what one can do. The Development Control Authority is responsible to making sure the amenities are preserved, to making sure that whatever buildings or whatever you're doing is in an orderly manner. It looks at the overall picture, take into consideration a number of things, and that is why sometimes the Development Control Authority asks for an environmental impact assessment, what called the EIA, so that they can be informed on what are the impacts on any project whether negative or positive. And so this is what the development control does. Whether you're building a small house, whether you're building a hotel, whether you're building a recreation facility or so, you've got to make an application to the Development Control Authority. Yes.
Tell me something, Mr. Bob. Based on your 20-year stint at the DCA, you must have seen many projects come and go. You've probably seen many disputes. You've probably seen many frustrations. And if I want to say something to St. Lucia, being a developer in my own little way, I've had my issues with the DCA over the years, but by and large, as Mr. Bob said, they are there to do a job, okay, and provide the necessary assistance. You will find a clash of personalities as the years go by, and you know, especially when a developer is spending their own money and you have to be waiting for a long period. But you know, I have grown to appreciate the fact that at the end of the day, the DCA was formed for a purpose, and they are a board, an arbitrary council, so to speak, who should look at the possibilities of doing things correctly. And on that score, I want to ask Mr. Bob a new question. Is the National Trust represented on the DCA board?
Now, as we speak, the National Trust is not represented on the DCA, and but under the Act, the DCA has the authority to request anybody, especially if it's
a sensitive
area, who has knowledge of the site and so, as we normally do. Recently, there was a project that came to the DCA, a developer wanting to go ahead and do some development on Pigeon Island, and the matter was referred to the DCA, although the matter was referred to the National Trust for their comments. And this is what the DCA does. They use a number of agencies as it relates to the project at hand to get their feedback, and also to then, before they actually do the consideration of the project. Not everything anybody comes back to say it's dealt with, but certainly everything is taken into consideration and in context of the project. This situation, for example, where the developer made application for approval in principle. There are two stages of approval, and I'll explain that later, but approval in principle is the first stage, where if you have an idea, it's just an idea to do something, and you want to, a development, and you want to find out if the land is suitable, would you be allowed to put it there? Because for a number of reasons, they have to find out the land use. Yes. Yeah. For instance, that may be a little exaggerated, but suppose you're going to build a 700-room hotel in a place that have no water.
Right.
Or in a place the water supply is limited, and if this person comes in, nobody else can get water.
Right.
You know, this is some of the things that has to be considered in terms of the land use. Or it may be, look here, this land is producing all the fruits and vegetables in this country.
Yes.
You cannot allow somebody to come there and decide, well, I'm going to cut all the trees and I'm going to have a development for recreational facilities and so. So there are a number of scenarios and situations that has to be considered. And in the case of the National Trust, whenever it's a situation that the Development Control Authority Board feels it is necessary to get the input, they contact them, send them a copy of
the application.
Well, not the total application.
Yeah.
but
What are they desirous of
That's
doing?
right.
Yeah.
And that was done recently in a case where a developer wanted to put something at Pigeon Island.
Yeah.
And we got the feedback from
The trust.
the trust.
Mhm.
But the thing is, the DCA is not involved in getting emotional or sentimental about this. Or the DCA don't have the authority to tell somebody, look, you shouldn't apply for this or shouldn't apply for that. It is based on the technical and scientific situations that's there with us. I'll give you a simple example. If somebody wanted to build a recreational facility at Pigeon Island and they wanted to know, well, is this spot ideal to do this? Is the land use compatible? What we have to look and see, okay, what has been going on at Pigeon Island? Is it recreational?
Yeah.
Is it this? And if it is, it's not our place to tell us, no, somebody else is already doing recreation there, so you can't come and do
That's
recreation.
not what your board is
No.
about. Yeah.
Our board looks at the physical facts and also scientific facts as to who they employ or what they do. It's none of our business, really and truly. Yeah.
Now, Mr. Bob, since you are the chairman of the DCA, the public would want to know certain aspects of what transpired because, as you know, there's a lot of emotions at play now with the whole development. I have listened to both sides. One side, by the chairman of the trust, says that the Dolphin Park is going to disrupt a reef on a certain section on the seabed. He also indicated that a fair amount of land will be taken by the developers if the project went ahead, which would disturb what is going on there. Can you highlight to us what really went on as far as what is the real truth? What is it the developers are looking for?
Well, you know, Mike, the developer is entitled to his privacy and confidentiality.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really not at liberty to say exactly what a developer has applied for. But what I can tell you is this. I think people should all behave professionally and don't let emotions carry them away.
Mm-hmm.
There are several stages in a development where people have recourse and where people can resolve a number of factors. And for example, if the developer has made an application,
Mm-hmm.
and as you say, there are things they say that there may be a situation of the reefs or whatever and stuff like that. The DCA board is a very responsible board. It's a board that would ask for the EIA, Environmental Impact Assessment. But
Which will be carried out by a professional.
yeah, and not only that, the profession, they will send, the DCA will give them the terms
The
of
guidelines.
reference,
Mhm. Okay.
what they would be looking for.
Mhm.
And also, the DCA will say, the persons that are going to carry out these activities on your behalf, we want to see their qualifications, all in an effort to make sure that
The right response is given.
that's right, and and professional people, you know. And so it is unfortunate when some persons jump the gun. For example, at approval in principle doesn't mean anything. In fact, the Act clearly states that approval in principle doesn't commit the government. The government cannot be held responsible for approval in principle, etc. and so on. Approval in principle is really an exploratory situation where the developer can look and see, well, would this be allowed there? And then, if they say yes to him, he then goes to the owner of the land, whether it's government, whether it's Crown, whether it's private individuals, and say, look here, we would like to negotiate with you to buy your property, lease your property,
or whatever.
rent your property, as the case may be.
Yeah.
At this stage, when the person comes in and get their permission to do this, then the DCA would say, okay, now that you know that you want to put this piece of property into that use which is approved for, we want to know what are the negative impacts that will create problems, what are the measures you will use to mitigate these problems. Using your example, if it is this, the developer say, I want to cut off a reef and so this, we have to see, look, what would be the consequence of digging up the reef and cutting it? Okay, the consequences will be, I'm just throwing things up in there. There'll be no fish. Say, okay, well in that case, we need to do something where you could mitigate that loss of no fish by either creating another source for fish. You can create a FAD somewhere else, or you can do, I'm just giving an example.
Yeah.
I mean,
all right, Mr. Bob, to date, you know, we've heard a lot of what has gone on so far. To date, to the best of your knowledge, I don't expect you to divulge any information here because you indicated that you cannot do that, and I understand that. But to the best of your knowledge, what has been done so far, other than an application has been submitted for permission in principle?
Approval in principle.
Approval in principle, yeah. Okay? Based on that, what I've told you, what's the question should I pose you? Yeah.
Mike, feel free to ask the question.
The trust is ready, has a lease on the land, they have to go to them. Do you think the trust has jumped the gun in becoming so emotional and creating such a story to the nation to upset everybody and the government in particular by saying that they want to do this, they want to roughshod over people? I mean, to the best of my knowledge, the Prime Minister, when he was approached, told the developers, go and meet with the trust, which they did. And even though people may say, because I've heard it out there, oh, the Dolphin Park is going to come in anyway. People say what they want. But you know, as a chairman of the DCA, that nothing can happen unless permission is given. If you have permission in principle, and then whatever is done afterwards, they have to communicate. And I think the best way forward would have been for the trust to meet with either you, or for instance, have the trust actually met with the DCA since you asked them for their permission? Where are we so far with all that?
You know, as I say, it is unfortunate, and it's for this same reason I said to you, I cannot divulge information
yes.
Of the developer.
Mm-hmm.
It is unfortunate
mm-hmm.
that the National Trust
mm-hmm.
betray a confidence in that the DCA sent them in confidence
mm-hmm.
the details of a proposal
mm-hmm.
for their comments.
Yeah.
You know, and they, in fact, one of the things I see on Google,
mm-hmm.
you know, coming from the trust, which is what the trust submitted back in their replies and response on that particular development. I think it is very unprofessional. It is also very misleading, and it is, to a certain point, malicious, because the development from the DCA was not duty bound to go to the trust with this. They could have gone to any other professional agency
yeah.
to do this. And they're not the only ones the DCA went to. The DCA invited comments from Sustainable Development, the Ministry of Fisheries, Ministry of Agriculture, about 10 other agencies. None of them, other than the National Trust, was up on radio jump into conclusions as to what will happen. Right now, as we speak, the proposal has not yet even been determined by the DCA. All that is being done now is gathering information so that the Development Control Authority would make the decision.
St. Lucia, I hope you have listened very cautiously to what the chairman of DC has said today. Please listen carefully to make your own determination. St. Lucia, this is Open Mic. We have now come to the end of the first segment of our program. We'll be right back. St. Lucia, this is Open Mic, and we're now back to the second segment of our program. When we left off, we were dealing with the pros and cons of how the DCA approaches its customers. My time today is normally quite limited, so there are a couple other areas I want to discuss, because I think St. Lucia should really be aware of the workings of their own country, as the chairman said, before jumping to conclusions. Having listened to the to and fro of this situation, I made some inquiries, and now what I'm saying is subject to correction. I understand at one point there were 2 members of the National Trust on the DCA board. So in other words, the board has, as the chairman says, a number of persons in different areas so they can draw on their expertise. I've also understood that those 2 individuals are no longer on the board based on the fact that the former administration, listen to me carefully, the former administration removed those 2 individuals from the board. And they were removed for reasons of, I don't know, I say no more, okay, for certain reasons. They were not removed by the United Workers' Party administration. To the best of my knowledge, based on the meetings which they have had, the members of the DC, of the National Trust, are no longer there. But I repeat, subject to correction, I do not know. This is what I understand. But what we want to discuss at this time is the fact that the trust itself has a moral and economic responsibility. It's a trust that has been in existence for 40 years, and by now the trust should be fully matured to know that it is one thing to have a development, it's another thing to have a bad development, and it's another thing to have a good development. Now, one has to be careful how they approach those developments, because St. Lucia is a small island with a lot of financial difficulties, and there should be no false hopes as to which direction one should go. The government is short of funds, as we all know. The Prime Minister has made it abundantly clear, the state of St. Lucia, and he has taken the necessary action in recent times to cut back on certain agencies that are underperforming for whatever reasons. And today is a very good opportunity for St. Lucians to understand the workings of government. Some 30 years ago, Mr. Bob, who is basically from Soufriere, decided to help Soufriere by starting or taking on something called the Soufriere Development Committee. Okay. Why did he do that? Mr. Bob set up a whole radio station, a TV station, out of his own finances because of his love for Soufriere and his family and friends who were in the area. At that time, St. Lucia, the dock, Soufriere dock, was in bad condition and very, 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 very bad. And he wanted to address the situation. He was having a lot of difficulties because Soufriere, as we all know, is a tourism basket for St. Lucia in many ways. And that was when I met Mr. Bob for the first time, 30 years ago or whatever it was, and he explained to me what he wanted to do. Based on what he wanted to do, I went along with Mr. Bob and assisted him to the best of my ability. Mr. Bob will explain to St. Lucia the role that I played 30 years ago. After he has given you the first part of what took place, I will fill in St. Lucia of what transpired as a result of myself and Mr. Bob working together to make the Soufriere Foundation what it is today.
Well, thanks, Mike. Thanks for helping me relieve those memories. Some of them were fond, some not so fond. But the thing is, in Soufriere at the time, although Soufriere was supposedly the breadbasket of Soufriere, of the island, tourism, you know, it enjoyed none of the perks from tourism. At that time, the Sulphur Springs was free. Anybody would drive down, go there, and so maybe a private fellow would go there and act as guide and stuff like that. But of course, the jetty was condemned and couldn't be used. So you couldn't have any boats or anything coming down there. We decided, a group of people, including like Michael Gustav and Nick Trubiscoff and Wayne Brown. Well, it was really Wayne Brown, Nick, and myself were the first three who started the initiative to try and do something that would bring some income into Soufriere. Because although everybody wanted to come and see the Piton, they only literally passed through Soufriere and left nothing. And the first project was, first of all, to try and see how we could build at least a jetty for tenders from the cruise ships. And so we had an idea, and Nick took me to St. Croix to see the boardwalk, how they had the boats were, and we decided to put a plan together and approach government to see if they would guarantee a loan for us to build this. At the time it was 1.5 million, which was a lot of money in those days. And we worked towards that. And when we went to the bank for the financing, the bank says, look here, no boats come here. So why do you want to build a jetty? We said, well, the reason no boats come is because we have no jetty. Anyway, with a lot of fight, in the end, it wasn't easy, but in the end, government finally saw the wisdom in doing this. But in the interim, we were determined to start this project with or without government's initiative, because we thought it was a project that would help the people. And this is when I came to you. You loaned me some money, $100,000, so I can pay the demurrage, because there were some things which the then Prime Minister didn't understand about the project and thought that...
And who was the Prime Minister then?
John Compton then. So John Compton. And it was quite a fight. But in the end, he recognized the need, and finally we got them to guarantee the loan for this.
I want to just intervene slightly here with Clem. When Clem spoke to me, that is the importance of talking to friends and to people who have an idea of certain things. And he indicated to me that they wanted to spend the $1.5 million. And I did pose the question to Clem and say, well, how are you going to get? And at the time, Clem was thinking of the yachts people who came into Soufriere, and I distinctly recall telling Clem, look, be careful, because we had built a slipway, and a lot of the old yachts fellas really didn't have much money to spend. Uh, I think I was the director of the bank at the
Yeah,
time.
you,
right?
you was the deputy chair of the bank.
Right.
Yeah.
So, having listened to Clem, I realized that Clem definitely had a good project. So, I got him. I think I encourage you to make an application to the bank.
Yeah,
Right.
well, yeah, it's, no, the thing is, we'd made the application to the bank, and the bank didn't think
Yeah.
it was,
Yeah.
they rejected
Yeah,
it.
rejected.
And then I came to you,
Yeah.
and I said,
And what
look,
I told Clem at the time, I said, Clem, you know something? You have all these catamarans in St. Lucia. Let us put a charge. I was also a director of the Port Authority. And I said, let's put a charge of $2 on every passenger landing in Soufriere on a catamaran. Because basically a person comes to St. Lucia maybe twice in their lifetime. So what the hell is $2 US? That's nothing. And Clem agreed, and I was able, as a director of the bank, to explain to the directors the importance of developing. And it's a long time, I don't remember all the details, but I know the project went ahead. But the bank is always very careful how they lend their money. And between myself and Clem, I distinctly remember we came up with an idea that we're going to print those booklets,
yes,
and they're going to leave it at the bank. So whenever a boat owner wanted to come down, he would buy a booklet of 50, 60, and it made it a lot easier because the bank got their money one time. And you know, Clem, I distinctly recall the Unicorn coming in,
yes,
the first trip, because they were the main people. And the owners refused to pay. And you asked the police to intervene, that that boat must not come alongside until that money is paid. And eventually it was paid. And when you look at the Soufriere Foundation today, what it's doing, we discuss it further as we go along. But the point I'm trying to make is that this foundation stood on its own virtually from day one, okay? And you built up. You never got any subventions from government.
never got 1 cent
Never
from
got 1
government.
cent.
It was
And yet you
subvention.
survived, okay?
Yes, and the thing is, as a matter of fact, not only we didn't get subvention, because, you know, I laugh now as I remember the story of the Unicorn, because we were charging a jetty toll, and we told Bob Elliott, look, you have to pay the toll. So he came in with his boat. He refused to pay. He wrote him move off. And I said, next time he comes, you know, we'll stop it. God rest his soul, I got Primrose Bledman, who was a lawyer, who prepared a thing to arrest the boat next time it came because he didn't pay. And only to find out that Bob Elliott had called, also, God bless his soul, Sir George Mallet, and tell him, look here, I am charging them to come there. And George Mallet told him, I don't have the authority to charge port dues, which is true. So this guy, on that basis, he declared he wasn't paying. But the boat was arrested, and the police came in, and I told him, now you have to pay me for the last time, and pay me for this trip, and you're not getting any credit. When he called, at that time, he called George Mallet, who said to him, I didn't tell you don't have to pay dock dues. I said, port dues. I said, I build my docks. I'm entitled to collect money. Just like Joan DeVoe built her garden, you can't tell her she can't collect monies for her garden. And then it was a good thing in a way, because the word got around and everybody understood that they had to pay when they come to use the facility. You know. The good thing is, and the model of this is, the foundation had to pay $29,200 a month. On the 11 years I was there, we never defaulted, not 1 month. Never got a cent from government. But we went ahead and did whatever
And
we had to
the
do.
loan was liquidated.
Yeah.
Okay. But more importantly, you all were still able, the foundation was to take monies and go and develop the Sulphur Springs, which was really backward, and bring it up to a world-class level.
Yeah. Well, it is true that we also got some help from SPIF, which is a CEDA Canadian grant agency, and so. Because when we were developing the Sulphur Springs, in fact, that's the only time we got Ministry of Infrastructure to contribute. The cost of the road coming from the Sulphur Springs going through Rabot was going to cost $3 million. And we said, okay, we will put in half, and government said they will put half. So the money SPIF gave us, we put the 50% and government paid the 50%. That was the only contribution, the road to the Sulphur Springs there.
But, you know, I raised this point today, St. Lucia, because of what is happening at the National Trust. So we can make some comparisons. However, we have just come to the end of the second segment of our program. We'll be right back. St. Lucia, this is Open Mic, and we're now back to the third segment of our program. When we left off, we were just about tying up to give St. Lucia a synopsis of how these organizations work and the way we get the help from. But the chairman would like to highlight to St. Lucia a couple of the intricacies at the DCA, so we know who are the people that are called upon to make the necessary decisions.
Yeah, well, Mike, what I'd like to point out is that the Development Control Authority is guided by statute, and it gives everybody an opportunity. For example, that is why I think it is so unwise and so unnecessary for one particular organization, or maybe any organization for that matter, should go out and run to the media. And so there's so many safeguards that are built into this legislation to protect both John Public and the developers. For example, there is a situation if a developer is not granted the thing, he has the right to appeal. There's an appeal board. He also has the right, if he's not satisfied with the appeal, to go to the courts, you know. Now, every institution that that works with the DCA knows that they're asked to send in their thinking, their guidelines, their advice, and so. But it is advisory. The responsibility at the end of the day rests with the Development Control Authority to consider everything and come out to what they think is best for development of the country. And that is why I think for anyone to jump from the very first round at approval in principle and run to the media and divulge information that is sensitive, information that can create bad blood and bad feeling among various persons, particularly if they know it is not correct. For instance, to display pictures on the internet showing exaggerated examples of what is going to happen in a development, knowing full well that the drawings you're putting out there is exaggerated, not drawn to scale, and the people looking at it have no way of knowing what the scale of the development is. This is intellectually dishonest, and it's unfortunate and unfair. And I cannot see how professionals can get involved in doing this. There are several other institutions DCA work with. For instance, the National Conservation Authority has the same responsibility as National Trust.
Okay.
National Trust is not the only indigenous body that can decide on this. DCA has the right to go to the National Trust, to the NCA, just as they would go to the National Trust and say, look here, I want you to preserve this site, I want you to do this, I want you to do this. They have exactly the same authority as the trust has for preservation of sites and stuff like that. So, the point I'm making is the safeguards you have in there. The DCA's responsibility is tremendous. As I say, a lot of people don't know that. You can't cut any mature tree on your land without DCA permission.
I know.
You can't put up a sign. People believe they can put a sign up. And in fact, this is some of the things that create problems for us, you know. You can't park old cars on the road. You can't do this. Look, for instance, under provision of amenities, that's section 35 of the Act, section 2, if any step specified in the notice served under section 1, anybody who injured the amenities by parking an old car, building an old shed and stuff like that, the DC has the right to compel them to remove it with a maximum of 8 days. If not, the DCA under that section, 35 section 2, has the right to go and demolish it themselves and build a person. The Development Control Authority has as its guidance the Act. Some of the things people believe, oh man, you do like this person so you break down his building. No. The Act is to provide a safe and wholesome amenity for everybody living in the community. And, and that is why it is necessary for persons not just to go and cut up land and put a little house and so on. The Development Control Authority is committed and it's there to assist you to doing those things, to do it properly so that you don't affect other persons.
You know, Clem, you spoke about a sign going up. Again, subject to correction. I was called by someone yesterday to take a drive to Pigeon Island where they put up a sign which says, say no to DSH, say no to the Dolphin Park. Now, as you rightly said, there is a responsible agency 40 years old with 1,800 members, and you have, I don't know how many board members that they have, but evidently, if that is correct and that sign went up, somebody authorized it. So it only shows that what is going on is not normal. The other question I want to pose to you, all your years, 20 years at the DCA, have you ever seen such aggravation and demonstrations against projects that have not even been certified to go ahead? You take, for instance, the causeway to Maria Island. All that the people have done is to put a proposal. They talk of, they never even took the time to see that it never joined to Maria Island until the government had to come out and explain that. They had to look at the drawings to see what was going on. But what I'm trying to say is that we seem to have, normally, any citizen can demonstrate because it's a democratic world. But when you have an agency like the National Trust, who we rely upon and getting subventions from the government, they're really like a quasi-government working together. And what is it all about?
This, I have to say, Mike, is, I mean, how I agree with you. What is the need for this? Because there are various forums which the Act allows for grave persons to come in. For example, the same way if persons throwing water on your land or a neighbor is building on your boundary and so on, you come to the Development Control Authority.
Yes.
And they are capable and always willing to help with these disputes. Now, I do not understand, and as I say, I cannot understand why National Trust as a professional can go out and go to people and agitate before they have the facts.
You know, for instance, let me go back 25 years. The National Trust denied Alan Chastanet in his capacity, I think, was he a minister or director of tourism when the jazz festival started? I'm trying to think, I'm not quite sure. But he went out and tried to get permission from the same National Trust to have the jazz festival. And he was flatly turned down. I'm not going to call the names of the people on the board at the time, but I distinctly remember the individuals. Coco Charles was also, I don't know what his position was at the National Trust, but Alan went to him and appealed to him by providing him the importance of using Pigeon Island for the jazz festival. And one of the reasons why he was turned down, he was told by one of the members, oh, the jazz festival is bringing a foreign element and it's incompatible with the culture of St. Lucia to have foreign people come in. Be that as it may, Alan was very persistent and eventually he got permission. And I really would like the Trust to advise St. Lucians how much money they have collected from the Jazz Festival over the last 25 years, because that has been part of the money they use to do some things.
Well, you know, this is why I say people get
Carried away.
yeah, and not realizing what goes around comes around. Because, for example, one of the things, the concerns of the Trust is that you know, you can't have too many people on the island. It's a pristine site, etc. and stuff. Yet you have the jazz festival there. You have other things there. You
Not
have
only
weddings.
That, the Martinicans who come
Yeah,
over,
the
what you call
Mercury.
it, Mercury.
Yeah,
Look at what, and I'm not against it. I'm for it.
yeah.
But look at what happens there. Okay. Yeah.
But not only that, they're contradicting themselves. In my opinion, I'm speaking
As
from
an
a personal
yeah.
point of view now, not on behalf of DCA now. And so I have understood that they want to build a conference center at the park there.
Yeah.
In fact, I listened to the radio yesterday and heard one of their members saying, well, they have plans to build a conference center. A conference center, you bring a conference center, you're talking about lots of people there. How does a conference center sit in the setting of
Virgin Island.
exactly, you know? So I think we have to be careful what we say on one side of our mouths, because we have to say it on the other side. I am disturbed that information that an institution gets goes out and publicize it without the permission of the owner of the information. You know, this Dolphin Park situation, as I'm speaking as a private individual now, it is not for the National Trust to go out before the people have gotten planning permission or so and vilify them. For instance, when the approval is given, it's published in the Gazette, so the details will be there. Until then, You cannot somehow, because you are able to lay your hands on the information, whether it was leaked to you, whether because of a privileged position it was sent to you to assess, and take it and use it on general media. It is not correct. And that is why I am saying that whatever people have can be addressed. The signs, for example, as you say, people don't realize the dangers of the sign. And the DCA will soon be embarking on an island-wide situation to regulate the signs. A lot of the signs are put up without any planning permission. Some of the things on the signs are totally obscene. In fact, I was going to Soufrière last Sunday, and when you get into going to La Quamengo, there is a sign there advertising Magnum or whatever, with a lady on this almost totally nude. You know, this is what we want to teach our children. The other thing too is all those accidents we have in, a lot of it is contributed to by sign on the highway. Somebody want to stop to read a sign and they run straight into another person. In all the times I've traveled all over the world, you will not get any signs on the highway. In Miami, you will not find a sign on the highway other than directional signs for the road. And all signs are made exactly the same size, not a small one here, a large one there, and so as we're doing down here.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, the directors or the board members of the trust have to understand really that they have a responsibility to the nation, because when you are given all those various sites, for instance, do they take care, is it called Fondor, where they have the jazz?
That's it, Fondor. That's the thing. I'm not sure if
I'm not
it's,
talking
if
about
it's,
in Soufrière. Fondor. Yeah.
no, but I'm not sure if they're the ones or if there's a special Fondor committee.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not sure. In fact, really and truly, the trust is supposed to give DCA a list of all the sites they do on a almost on a regular basis.
At least on an annual
You know?
basis, so
Yeah.
you have an idea.
We don't know when last we saw this.
You know, I'll tell you something, Clem. I'm not looking to penetrate or degrade anybody's, should I say, performance. But look at what is happening down in the south. I've just been hearing that the dump which was put up is being, the overflow from it is affecting the mangrove. Okay. I listened to Mr. Tulsi last night on a television show where he was giving his views, and he said that they checked it out and it really came from the overflow from the hospital which had been put at the St. Jude's place. Right? Now, what I'm saying, if the mangrove is one of our biggest mangroves in St. Lucia, and they were doing their work, should they have waited till the mangrove is affected to such an extent that they have to spend money now to try to rectify it, when in fact that should have been brought to the attention of the DCA or what, if that's what they're there for, okay? That's one aspect. The second aspect was, I'm not knocking Dr. Anthony and his government for bringing Le Paradis to St. Lucia. It's a form of investment. But by the same token, I'm hearing yesterday at the parliamentary discussions, I learned a lot listening to various members talking, that there were different types of snakes and birds there, and that's all gone. And, you know, and we heard nothing, another word from the trust. So, you know, the trust has to be very careful how it operates so it doesn't appear to be one-sided. Either being one-sided or probably not having the right persons to follow up what is going on. They're enjoying a privilege which seems to work only one way when they want it to work. They have to be fairer in what goes on because governments come and governments go, you know, and it is important for all of us to realize that we have a role to play.
Just so that before we close very quickly, you brought up the question of members of the trust on the board. There are two aspects. There can be board members in their own rights that are members of the trust. So obviously if they're there, they would inform the trust of what is going on. It's not necessarily that they are specifically representing the trust alone. There were a number of persons in other capacities that were also members of the trust and they are on the board.
St. Lucia, this is Open Mic. We have now come to the third segment of our program. We'll be right back. St. Lucia, this is Open Mic, and we're now back to the fourth and final segment of our program. In this segment of the program, we are now going to highlight the importance of agencies like the National Trust, Sophia Foundation, and others that can actually help the government. Because, you know, it's like children. People have children. You send your children to school, you help them with their education, and we expect those children to come back into the fold and assist their country and their parents and those who assisted them. Now, earlier on, I spoke about the Sophia Foundation and how it started with very meager resources, and after 30 years, it has become a very profound institution. Profound in the sense that they actually give scholarships today. They help out at carnival time. They assist schools. But more importantly, the Hummingbird project, which the Taiwan government is assisting with, which is costing a little over $2 million. The foundation is actually going to inject close to a little over $1 million into the project. You know, Mr. Bob, tell me something. How many people are employed by the foundation today?
Right now in excess of 130.
Can you imagine that?
And the foundation actually is now a multi-million-dollar business.
Isn't that something?
And this is, although it depends on government, but it is a limited liability company.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it is limited by guarantee so that the directors are not liable in the event of failure.
Yes.
But nonetheless, it is run along, well, it is supposed to run along the lines of commerce, you know, so that you cannot go to government and keep saying you need money for this or money for that. And
Tell me
stuff like that.
something, Mr. Bob. If we had to put a figure on the salaries, the monthly salaries of the foundation, give me a ballpark.
I'm sure when you're dealing with 130 persons, it would be like 600,000 a month.
You see, can you imagine that, St. Lucia? An organization that started with nothing, $600,000 a month inside. And I know for a fact the CEO, because it was made public when he was last there, I think it was Dr. Francois.
Yeah.
He was getting like $12,000 a month salary. That's just one guy, okay? And you know, when you look at it, what the foundation was formed, virtually the brainchild of Clem Bob, by getting together with some people and having a vision.
Well, as I say, the persons, well, it's like Nick Trubiscoff, Joan DeVoe, and Wayne Brown,
Yeah.
and some of the other people, Michael DeBulle to a certain extent, and
Right.
so. But it was people in the community
Mm-hmm.
who was looking forward to make a contribution to the country.
Yeah.
because you had to understand, and one of the things that John Compton used to explain at the time, he said, look, Soufriere had really no industrial revolution or anything. The taxes government collect from Soufriere was less than the pay packet of teachers and stuff like that, because there were hardly any economic activities down there. So it was very difficult for Soufriere to make demand on the public purse when they
were not contributing anything. Yeah.
And so that is why we thought, look, we don't have to depend on government. We can then motivate our own people to do their own development. And just because a facility is public doesn't have to be owned by government.
Correct.
And that's what we set out to prove.
Yeah, we must get away from, which is what past and present administration have said. You know, a lot of people who go away and study, become qualified, instead of starting their own business, they're looking to get a job with government. Government can only absorb so many people because, you know, look at the number of well-qualified agriculturists on the island. They're not going to work on their own, and they have the ability to do it. All it takes is some discipline to be able to do what you have to do, and to be able, because we all have to do our part to get the country going. And you know, going back to the trust, to the National Trust, I think someone mentioned that they employ 60 people, okay? Now, I don't know what their salaries are there, but at this stage of their life, after nearly 40 years or 30 years, whatever the case may be, and by their own admission, they get $2.1 million a year in donations or what it is, in addition to the $700,000 a year that government was giving. They should understand that the government itself is limited what it can do. And there are other agencies similar to the Soufriere Foundation that will probably spring up today, which have to be helped. So after 30 years, you should be able to stand on your own. And you know, the attitude that they're taking today and trying to drum up the evidence all over St. Lucia that the government is dictatorial and all that kind of thing here. The government have merely asked them for a plan. What is the way forward?
And I think, you know, not speaking as chairman of DCA, I think a government has the responsibility to, they're the ones that hold ultimate responsibility to making sure that people's economic situation is bettered. You know, you cannot decide that you're going to do this. Even in DCA, when we look at the EIAs, the impacts on whatever environment you're going to do is not only physical impacts. You have to look at, well,
economic.
That's right. You say, well, it's true this guy wouldn't be able to go and bathe there now that this project is there, but he and his family will be earning a living. You know, so there is trade-off, and that is why you have the impact assessment that will give you all the scenarios, and then you can decide which has the least negative impacts and do this. Because, let's face it, in this world, there's no such thing as a free ride.
Correct.
There has to be a trade-off.
Yeah. You know, Clem, since my son became Prime Minister of the country, I get a lot of emails, I get a lot of phone calls from all walks of life, all walks of life. I got an email from a cousin of mine living abroad for the last 50 years. Oh, Michael, you know, your son has to be careful because what you're going to leave for our children and grandchildren. And my question is then, that's fine, but does anybody realize and accept the fact that hundreds of children are leaving school every year? Some of them cannot even afford a meal in this country. Are we to close our eyes based on what you just said a while ago? The DCA has a responsibility to look at both the economic and
the physical
and the physical impact of the country. Yeah, you know, I've said time and time again, when people talk of, oh, they shouldn't have a hotel on the beach, you know, that is fine. But here's a question I want to pose to St. Lucia. If you have an oil well, are you going to say you must not explore? You mustn't tap the oil? The beach is our oil well. We don't have oil in St. Lucia. That is where we get our revenue from. So, you know, now, I'm the first to say and agree with other people, maybe a hotel should not be directly on a beach, but 40, 50 years ago, when we had nothing, we had to bend. Now that we're in a slightly stronger position, we can say to developers, okay, fine, you can build, but you need to go so many feet back. So, because all beaches are public, you know, I mean, whether you want to accept it or not, when somebody puts down a hotel in an area, and, you know, very few St. Lucians tend to go because they themselves want their own privacy. They want a basket on the beach to have a thing, and they feel uncomfortable. But that is the price we have to pay because you have people coming to the country. What is your view on that?
My view on that is that even the more developed countries and so are seeing the need to do this. For instance, America is aggressively, very aggressively advertising for tourism. And you would think that America has all the manufacturing, all other production and so that they don't need to do this. So we are under the impression here that if you have sand and sea, and that's it.
That's it, yeah.
But you need a lot more because the people that are becoming tourists today are like you and I. I go out too, and I make demands on these other countries. I want my peace and I want my quiet and stuff like this. But as I said earlier, there is no such thing as a free ride. If you need to develop your economy, there's some things you have to do. Of course, that is why you should have guidelines so that nobody takes unfair advantage. But there is no way that you have a pendulum swinging only one side. And that is why it is important that we have to give and take. And a government at the end of the day is responsible, and that is why the electorate decides who they want to be the government.
You know, sorry, go ahead.
Singapore is an example.
Yeah.
You got throw a piece of chewing gum on the ground, far less.
Yeah.
But look at their success.
That's right. But you know, you just raised one point before we close, because I've got a signal from my boss that we have to close off. But if you look at the National Trust today, it has they have 1,800 members. You have a government that just got into power. Okay, how many votes were cast in total in St. Lucia?
I don't have the exact figure, but I would believe ballpark should be about 80,000.
80,000.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
80,000. And let us say, I'm told that the government won by 11,000 votes. So you're talking of 50,000 versus 30,000. So 50,000 people voted for the United Workers' Party for a particular reason.
Yeah.
They wanted a change of government because they were unhappy at the direction this country is going. So if the Prime Minister's party is representing 50,000 St. Lucians, I think he has the right to speak for those 50,000 people based on the fact that you have 1,800 in an organization or 2,000. I'm not decrying or putting down the members of the trust, but they have to understand, as Mr. Bob says, you have to weigh it up, balance the thing off, and find out what is it they want from him. But they want a change in this country.
But let me just ask a simple question. the trust is behaving that they're very tight for cash. If you have 1,800 members at $10 a month, you know,
Yes,
where is that money going?
right.
Because if you have to depend, and you only have 60 people employed for salaries and so, and you have the incomes from the various sites that
Donations,
you're responsible
Agencies,
for,
yeah. Oh,
how come you can't make ends meet? Something is wrong.
that's correct, yeah. St. Lucia, this is Open Mic. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our program. I want to say thank you for listening. Again, I consider myself so fortunate to get people like Mr. Bob on my show because I always say that I learn a lot from these people. So this is Open Mic saying good night.